With passion, they commit to succeed. No more shadows in the night. They're shining oh so bright. Strong women bringing change guaranteed. Women lead, women lead.
Welcome to Women Lead, a production of the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, Inc. We are your hosts. I'm Kathy Eggleston.
I'm Michelle Austin Pammies.
And I'm Bernadette Norris Weeks. Ladies, we had such an amazing Women of Color Empowerment Conference.
Yes.
Wow. It was really, we knocked it out of the box.
Our first social justice conference.
Exactly, because it was needed. We could not ignore everything that's going on in the world right now. And social justice was timely, that topic, that is.
Absolutely. Well, socially distanced, but social justice. We always like to kick off the day with a reference to our roots, our past history, and we couldn't have done a better job than with Dr. Marvin Dunn. I think this may have been the first conference that we started with Harriet Tubman.
How do you top that? How do you top Harriet Tubman?
So we went on to discuss environmental justice. And in that context, we also brought in the plight of the Black farmer, which is an environmental and economic issue.
Actually, we did a show about that too.
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
We did it before, but now we brought the full spectrum of the issue to the conference.
Exactly.
We also talked about healthcare disparities, which cause social injustice. And their healthcare, both from a physical health and from a mental health perspective.
And of course, we can't forget about combating voter suppression. I mean, we had tremendous election experts talking about that topic, and can't wait to share some of those highlights as well. In addition to that, we talked about education and what's going right with our Broward College president and so many other amazing leaders really giving us insight on what is going right in terms of education today. And of course, we can't forget about Laura Coates.
We can't forget about Laura Coates, and I don't think any attendee at that conference can forget. She was an amazing speaker. Without notes, without teleprompter, she delivered a message that moved everyone.
Yes.
She did.
Well, we talked about the economics of housing. We always talk about leadership, and we talked about how to lead from where you are and grassroots leadership.
And developing future leaders.
Yes.
Which is a great conversation.
And then today we are going to focus our show on one particular panel.
Yes.
Yes, today we'll be talking about the media in particular. And we are sharing with you the panel entitled Reshaping Our Narrative, Influence, Inclusion, and the New Media.
Well, the idea around this panel has a lot to do with the tug of war between professional and citizen journalism. This panel was designed and delivered on the many ways women of color can reshape the narrative, often about ourselves, and increase our influence and navigate the inclusion in the new media age.
Well, the panel featured several heavy hitters in the media who all happen to be people of color. It was moderated by Audra Birch, national correspondent for the New York Times, and the panelists included Marcia Pledger, the Florida Times Union opinion and engagement editor, Constance Jones, news anchor from NBC6,
a true friend of the Institute,
Terrence Shepard, news director for WLRN, and Monica Richardson, the executive editor of the Miami Herald.
They're both terrific.
Yes, but right now we have a problem. Everyone's a journalist. They're sharing materials on Facebook, and they call it news. And so we had to look at how is it that we can compete with all of the noise caused by that social media and get at the truth.
Exactly, especially when so many people get their information and news from social media.
Well, it's a complex conversation because I'm old enough to remember newsrooms where no one looked like us. And so the democratization of the media can be a good thing, but professional standards, we've got to talk about that.
We do have to talk about it. And I'm so pleased that we'll be diving into some of the highlights of the Women of Color Empowerment Conference on the media. So stay tuned. Come right back with us after these messages.
Women Lead television show is being brought to you by Toyota, inspiring all of us to let's go places.
At the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, our mission is to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. We do this in a variety of different ways, including but not limited to providing mentorship opportunities for young professionals where we assist in helping to create paths to leadership. We empower women to develop capacities for social change. We produce programs that promote heritage awareness, and we provide training opportunities for business and government. Our institute holds seminars focused on professional success techniques, and we host many other events such as our popular Advocates for Change and Leaders Connect. The Women of Color Empowerment Institute publishes a magazine called Women Lead. Our signature event is the Women of Color Empowerment Conference, a yearly conference where hundreds of leaders gather from all across the United States and beyond. To learn more about membership and how you can support our programs or be a sponsor of the Women Lead TV, visit us at nationalwomenofcolor.com. Again, that's nationalwomenofcolor.com.
The law office of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell is a full-service law firm practicing in the area of governmental law, including the representation of municipalities, civil litigation, personal injury, real estate, and corporate transactional matters. With over 100 years of collective experience, our attorneys are admitted to practice before state courts, federal courts, and the United States Supreme Court. We are conveniently located in downtown Fort Lauderdale and can be reached at 954-768-9770. Or for more information about the law firm of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell, visit our website at apnwlaw.com. That's apnwlaw.com.
Welcome back to Women Lead. Our Women of Color Empowerment Conference this year was focused on the issue of social justice, and today we're focusing on the media panel that was a part of the conference. It brought out how important it is to have diversity in our newsrooms.
Absolutely, and those panelists were all outstanding. I'll tell you, one of the clips that I remember vividly is Constance Jones talking about how we're seeing differently, when we're doing just regular everyday things, and how that may be interpreted by the police or the general public. Just dancing, for instance.
Yes, we did discuss that amongst ourselves as well. The idea that you see a group of young black people, for example, on South Beach, and they're dancing and listening to music, but to some, just that larger group of black people is scary. It's intimidating. What are they doing?
Yes. Whole laws have been written about this just recently.
Absolutely. And this is important in the social justice conversation because oftentimes this is where interactions happen with the police, and often they don't go well for us.
No, they don't.
Let's look at what our panelists had to say.
Most recently, there has been a lot of reporting on the crime on South Beach, and more specifically just after COVID, when the governor really opened up the state to travel, right? So in my newsroom across all the TV newsrooms in South Florida, there are very limited black managers. So framing the story initially was very difficult, right? Because there would be kids dancing in the streets. Now, is that chaos and violence? Or is it just girls twerking in the corner, right? Like, I don't know. So having to draw the line and having these conversations with people who may describe some of our activity as dangerous, and there was some extremely dangerous behavior. And then there's some behavior that should not be painted as dangerous while we're showing video of people maybe dancing or in a group. So it became very difficult in a way to have these conversations with people who have no connections to the black community, who don't understand that, half of the people there look like my cousins out of Texas who came here to have a good time and unfortunately, got caught up in a group of people who were not doing the best thing to represent our people, right? So I think it's important to have conversations and not be afraid to educate other people in your newsroom about what may be considered violence and may just be something that's culturally, acceptable in some circles. Now, I went on to do a story with the mayor of Miami Beach. And if you've lived in Miami, there has been a history of police violence with Black tourists for years. I remember very specifically, I was a morning beat reporter for half a decade, and they used to call it Urban Beach Weekend. They don't have it now. And there was a shooting, and police officers fired over 40 rounds into a car where there was a Black. It was one of the worst stories that we covered here in South Florida. And it was just a few minutes ago. It was only like 12 years ago when that happened. So there has been a history of that, and educating your fellow journalists and people in your newsroom about this isn't a one-time thing. It's not just COVID. Like, why are there this much aggression between police and Black tourists, right? And is this an anomaly? I worked in Richmond, Virginia, and they had the same issue with Black Beach Weekend in Virginia Beach. But there, they decided to transform the association with that, and Pharrell came in and rebranded the week, and it became a welcoming environment for Black tourists in the area. So I say all that to say that you can't be afraid to stand in what you know, even though it may be uncomfortable to have conversations with people who don't understand. After George Floyd, I think there was a call for journalists to be like, yeah, no, this is what it is, and this is what it's not, right? It's not about opinion. This is what the Confederate statue stands for, and this is when it was erected, right? So these are things you have to educate your fellow newsmakers and understand that there's some people who just don't know, who don't understand some of these stereotypes or why things could be considered harmful to certain communities.
Constance, do you get weary of educating your coworkers about these issues?
Well, I will say I am so thankful to be sitting on a panel with managers. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being managers in South Florida. We have very limited we have tons of reporters and tons of people reading the teleprompter, but when it comes to making decisions, the newsroom managers, there are very few. And so the managers help to play a role. It's an unfortunate thing, and I think it took George Floyd for a need to have these diverse conversations, because I can't be the only one. In Richmond, Virginia, where there was extreme race riots, it was the capital of the Confederacy, I was the only Black woman at my station, at least, beyond the age of 35, who could have these conversations about, most of the other reporters were like 20. So I had to have these conversations.
Well, clearly, diverse leadership in newsrooms is important. Now, another important topic that the panelists brought up was diversity of news sources inside their professional lives. And I have to say that for many of us who are living, fairly well, we've been taught by our parents to live understated.
That's true. There have been a number of times that Michelle and I, for instance, we're law partners, have been contacted about people doing news stories about our law practice. And we have just flat turned them down. In fact, we even laugh about it now, because I think the idea is when people think you're doing, like you said, a little bit okay, they tend to think maybe you're doing too well. Maybe you have too much. Even if it's absolutely what you do and you do nothing else, that is economic jealousy, and it's real.
It is real. In fact, we have a friend who recently was terminated from a position where she was an independent contractor because certain people believed that she had too many such independent contracts. And so we hesitate. And that's why Marsha Pledger, one of our panelists, indicated that when she was a business news reporter, she had difficulty finding Black people in business willing to talk to her. Let's hear what she has to say about this.
One big frustration as a Black business journalist, a real big frustration has been that I'll go to some of the more really successful businesses, or whether it's a startup, of course they're going to want to talk to you. But I found that mostly they don't want to talk to me, and that's because there's an extra burden when you're a person of color, I found, in business, because there's so few at a certain level that are doing really well, that when you come out and talk about how great your business is going, then you have more people saying, well, can I get some money? Can you be on my board? Can you, sponsor my team? And it's not the same with other races. I mean, with what I found, and that's what people have told me, And then, like, I'll give you an example. This was, everybody's heard of in this room, crab in the barrel syndrome, whatever. But it wasn't even a real story. This is many years ago. All it was the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce had nominated their 2 entrepreneurs of the year. And so this guy, I didn't pick him. They picked him. He was a construction owner, and he would not want to talk to me. I just need a quote, for God's sakes. It's not even a real story. And he just was like sweating. He was just like, came to the news, and I was like fidgety, and I was like, "What is up with you?" And then I said, "Just give me a comment. You're happy to this honor. I mean, I didn't ask for much." He was like, "Man, it's that fence. It's that fence, man." What fence? And then he said, in the Hispanic community, it's like you trying to climb up that fence, somebody want to tear you down. And I was like, "Oh, okay, I didn't know." But anyway, that's one of my frustrations.
That's a very interesting perspective. And I think that, and we were talking during the break about how we really need to break this cycle of silence and allow ourselves to highlight our accomplishments and really step up to the greatness and Black excellence that we exhibit.
It's very important. It's important for the youth. Imagine if they only hear of accomplishments coming from one group.
So it's clearly incumbent upon us, all of us, in order to change the narrative, to do our parts as well.
Talking about our narrative, right now it's all about Black Twitter. And the question is, what is Black Twitter?
Well, clearly something we need to pay attention to, Black Twitter writ large, because social media is where virtually all of our young people are getting their first draft of news, and so many mature people now also.
That's true. And Black Twitter, to answer your question, from what I've been told, is just a conglomerate of issues and hashtags and other information that people are able to compile, and they call it all Black Twitter. It's just what Black folks are talking about.
On Twitter.
On Twitter.
So now we're going to listen to our panelists as they discuss the impact of Black Twitter.
All of us, we have accounts on social media, and we are looking to see what's trending. And primarily, in addition to looking at the news of the day, we're going to look and see what culturally is interesting to us. So we have a few producers who keep that in conversation. When people in our community are doing these things that are thoughtful and interesting, Kodak Black has been doing a lot here in South Florida recently, and it was trending that he had paid, or he contributed money to a police officer's daughter after she died of COVID, and that was trending. And these are stories that people remember, and so for people to see me as a reliable source of information, they want to know that I'm talking about stuff that's trending locally and that people are talking about in the water cooler or on Zoom or wherever people are meeting. Coffee shop? I don't know. So yeah, and Black Twitter, we lead the conversation off, and these are conversations that people want to hear about. So yeah, I think it's important to know what's, don't get engrossed in it, but you do need to know what's happening on social media. And Black Twitter is a fun place to sometimes find things.
It's been a great news source to find voices that we wouldn't have featured, quite frankly, ever. How do you find people? Especially during the pandemic, has made it even more hard. So it's been a valuable source, and I find things even with LinkedIn. It's not even just Twitter, or Facebook. So that's been helpful.
Black Twitter, Black culture is American culture. Therefore, it is to be included in any ideation process, any story pitches. So it's a valuable source.
All right, you heard it from professional journalists. Black Twitter is here to stay, and it's a useful tool in the right hands. We'll be right back with more Women Lead.
This is James.
Jimmy!
Mom, Dad, this is James.
Jimmy!
James? James Harrison from Roosevelt High?
Jimmy! Jimmy! Oh! You good, Jimmy?
The 2021 Toyota RAV4.
Jimmy!
The RAV for all of you. Right now, lease a new 2021 Toyota RAV4 LE for just $249 a month for 36 months. Toyota. Let's go places.
At the Women of Color Empowerment Institute, our mission is to enhance and expand leadership by women of color. We do this in a variety of different ways, including but not limited to providing mentorship opportunities for young professionals, where we assist in helping to create paths to leadership. We empower women to develop capacities for social change. We produce programs that promote heritage awareness, and we provide training opportunities for business and government. Our institute holds seminars focused on professional success techniques, and we host many other events such as our popular Advocates for Change and Leaders Connect. The Women of Color Empowerment Institute publishes a magazine called Women Lead. Our signature event is the Women of Color Empowerment Conference, a yearly conference where hundreds of leaders gather from all across the United States and beyond. To learn more about membership and how you can support our programs or be a sponsor of the Women Lead TV, visit us at nationalwomenofcolor.com. Again, that's nationalwomenofcolor.com.
The law office of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell is a full-service law firm practicing in the area of governmental law, including the representation of municipalities, civil litigation, personal injury, real estate, and corporate transactional matters. With over 100 years of collective experience, our attorneys are admitted to practice before state courts, federal courts, and the United States Supreme Court. We are conveniently located in downtown Fort Lauderdale and can be reached at 954-768-9770. Or for more information about the law firm of Austin, Pammies, Norris, Weeks, Powell, visit our website at apnwlaw.com. That's apnwlaw.com.
Welcome back to Women Lead. I really enjoyed hearing the conversations about balance and how, as reporters, they really balance their own stress, because I know many times, I can only absorb news in pockets of space, because, sometimes it can be depressing. And if you're in that cycle where that's your job. Your job is to absorb everything that you're hearing. It was just interesting to hear how they process stress.
I mean, what stressful jobs, 24/7, breaking news, decisions about what gets in and on and what doesn't, framing the issues, not having sources, the list goes on.
Yes.
The list does, and you have to add to it the fact that here you are reporting news on the people in your community and having the bulk of it coming out as crimes and negativity. I know that recently I was bombarded as a Haitian American with news that was negative. There was an assassination of a Haitian president in Haiti. It's not both people now, but we're at the border and we're just miserable and suffering and trying to get in. It was exhausting for me. So imagine if I were a journalist and that was the coverage that I was charged with the responsibility of providing. It would be tough.
It's a lot. And so let's go to a clip and see what our panelists had to say about balancing stress.
So I live about an hour from the station, and so I typically decompress then, but I have a decent faith life. I work out some, but I tend not to take anything too seriously. I do lately, a lot of news, a lot of what we do just by the nature of news is sad, and so it having the blues lately, that Parkland shooting, that made me consider, do I still want to be a journalist? It was really, my wife was acquainted with one of the people killed. That was pretty low, but I think because of the other balance issues I have in my life, I'm surviving.
Self-care, I kind of suck at that lately, especially with this move across the country. But before then, I learned how to swim several years ago at age 48. So I do that. so, and spending time with my baby girl who just went off to college.
On the self-care, this is a big thing for me. I'm a single mother of a 9-year-old in a big role. And for the first time in my 50 years, sought therapy. Last year in my life, after having to try to be teacher and journalist and everything else. So I encourage that in my staff. I bring mental health experts into my newsroom now because it's so important. The other thing I'll say about self-care is I've tried to learn when to say no. When you talked earlier, Constance, about the conversations we have to have, I recall an editor reaching out to me, and he wanted me to ghostwrite. This is not where I am now, but this person wanted me to ghostwrite the note we send to the staff after the George Floyd incident, and about why it was important and what it meant. And I was all a mess after that. I couldn't write anything for anybody, much less you, a white man, who, I'm sorry, if you can't lead that conversation, that's your problem. But I had to learn to say no, and that's hard to do, but that's a part of my self-care, particularly as a journalist, saying no to readers and saying no to people who, my time is very valuable, and how I spend it is how I want to spend it. I'm here today, for instance, on a Saturday morning. But learning when to say no is a part of that self-care as well.
So I didn't get the chance to work from home during COVID. I was in the studio every day. I was in the field every day. So I didn't have the chance to Zoom and do a newscast in my bedroom. I had to be dressed up. I had to be on the road. I had to be face-to-face with people, possibly endangering my life, my husband's life. So I was freaked out every day. So I went back to crocheting on a regular basis. I really recommend, if you're a crafter, and sewing. I was sewing masks like every single day just to be in a meditative state, not thinking of news, not thinking of the requirements of the day, just engrossed in something completely different, and it allowed my brain just to relax and not think of the pressures of the day. So I really encourage people to pick up a craft. I've been crocheting for years, and I really encourage people to do. I mean, it's my yoga.
Well, those were specific and relevant tips of how we can all interact with the news media and get our voices heard. And ladies, as we've discussed, this is more important than ever, especially in our context of social justice.
Absolutely. Telling our stories is very important. We're going to have to write editorials to the editor, make sure that we combat some of the fake news that's online sometimes. And of course, call out the news media when we don't feel that they are covering our communities appropriately.
And the bottom line is that you can write about it, you can develop relationships with reporters so you can talk about it, but you have to be part of the news process, or else they'll be talking about you in ways you don't like.
Well, the news media is indeed our fourth estate, and they're important to our democracy. We have got to preserve, protect, and participate in order to have our voices heard and in order to have these institutions remain strong.
Kathy, you have summed it up, and I hope that our audience was able to take many of the nuggets that were shared as we have been able to do here today. And until the next time,
Be empowered.